Hello and welcome to Football Never Sleeps, our off-season Notre Dame football YouTube show that's going to run weekly, at least through the Blue Gold game late in April and probably the NFL draft as well at the very end of April. We move the time or days around because we want to reflect the best news of the week for you. So please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell. This will get you, Tyler guarantees me this will get you everything you need in life if you do those two things. We also take your questions during the course of our conversation tonight. We've got a lot to talk about. We talked to Al Golden, defensive coordinator today, some of the linebackers on the team. Since we last saw you or you saw us, there was ND Pro Day, lots to go on recruiting, including a new commitment today. We also have a new commitment in Inside ND Sports we'd like to talk to you about. And again, fill up that question queue because we'll work our way through the questions as we go through the topics.
Yeah, indeed. It is nice to see people popping in and talking in the chat, even if it's not a question. We do appreciate that. And for those that may be new, as I say every episode, if you are on a desktop, make sure that you use the chat box to the right-hand side of the screen. Make sure you're either using the YouTube website or on the app. And then if you're on a mobile device, the chat box should be to the bottom of the screen. So at some point you should see people talking in there, and that's when you can also chime in to the conversation and ask us your wonderful questions that I will make Eric answer, even if he tries to dance around them. But before, as we get started here today, I know, Eric, we talked a bit about or talked with a few of the linebackers from Notre Dame's team today and defensive coordinator Al Golden. I know you spent you prioritized Al Golden today in addition to Nolan Ziegler. Let's start talking about Al Golden first. What was your biggest takeaway from that conversation?
My biggest takeaways, two of them were, one was how he's trying to find the talent near the bottom of the depth chart that's ready to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And especially they're doing this with the defensive linemen, but I think a little bit with everybody. They're mixing and matching kind of the starters. Before every practice, nobody knows who the starters, who the ones are going to be, and they move them around, change them from day to day, and that way they get a look of maybe you have somebody like Tyson Ford mixed with Javante Jean Baptiste and maybe some Howard Cross. So maybe some of the more experienced guys, and you get a different look, maybe a little bit different perspective. He said it's really great for morale, but again, early in the spring practice, at least, all these guys are getting reps with the ones against the number one offense. And so this gives them a chance, if they've not been given opportunities before, to kind of shine or not. The other part about it that I thought was really interesting was how much the continuity of having a defensive coordinator for 2 years in a row, the same defensive scheme for 2 years in a row, is really helping both the players and helping Al Golden coach the players. There's only 5 guys on the defense that have had a defensive coordinator for 2 years in a row. Now all of them will, but going into this first spring practice, there were only 5 of them. And a couple of things, how it helps Al Golden is, there were things that they did not knowing the personnel all that well. Because remember, he came in late. He came in after the Super Bowl. So it was mid-February or so when he really got his feet wet. So not really knowing the personnel and not knowing the opponents, they practiced a lot of things last spring that they didn't need to, and they missed on practicing on some things where they got into the fall and they really hadn't worked on those things. Now there's kind of a blending of those things. The other thing is the players are picking up things a lot more quickly because the terminology is familiar, the scheme is familiar. They kind of get the big picture of things, at least the more veteran guys do. And when I say more veteran guys, even somebody like Jalen Sneed, who's a sophomore, they get it better. And so I think all those things are going to help accelerate the improvement of this defense, and it needs to improve. They lost some key pieces, and despite being the number 22 defense in the country, in total defense, there were some obvious flaws with this defense.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of players on the defense that are expected to play significant roles that didn't at least contribute in some way last season. There are some guys like that, particularly like sophomores on the defensive line that didn't play as freshmen, but there are a lot of guys that had playing time, whether big or small, and so that allowed them to get a better grasp of the scheme and the fact that it's not changing, although obviously it can change week to week based on game plans, but the sort of the basics of that and the understanding of that, everyone's sort of working at a better level than they would have been last season with so many different things going on. So I think it's probably a good thing, particularly on defense, that there's so much continuity on the staff as well. Like there wasn't a lot of turnover there on the staff. The biggest one was your graduate assistant linebackers coach, which is an important position, but given how much James Laurinaitis did help coach and how much Max Bola will be asked to coach. But you have a lot of continuity there, both on the staff and with the players, and Al Golden should be more comfortable, more confident, and better understanding of both what Notre Dame is up against and what it has on its team. And the fact that he sort of was aware of that and was willing to speak to that, I thought was pretty enlightening today.
Right. When we talk about some of the players in the younger classes, it's an interesting dynamic, and especially how open Al Golden is to those players helping them, because and recruiting rankings aren't everything, but let's just say that they are somewhat significant. The higher pedigree players are the younger guys. I mean, the way Marcus Freeman has recruited in 2 years on the defensive side of the ball, you have a lot of Rivals 250 guys in that group. So it's an interesting, sometimes they're better athletes, sometimes they're just more advanced, and then you have the experienced players. So I think you may see some guys get overtaken. You also may see maybe a more equitable rotation, and there's a few players I think that applies to, but I'm really eager to see. And then you have the unknowns, guys like Christian Gray. I mean, we know he has great high school film, but can he get into a role at cornerback? Can Ben Minnick do that at safety? Because they certainly need depth there.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating spring as far as I'm concerned.
I really like hey, we're going to have new starters every day. Everyone's going to get a chance to run with the ones. I like it in multiple ways. I think it works like, hey, if you think you're hot stuff, like you're going to get your opportunity. And if you do well, we'll give you more chances.
Right.
I mean, in theory, like obviously Notre Dame has to follow through on that. If someone does well, then the coaches need to probably take heed to that and give them more opportunities. But if they don't do well, then I think the players should be able to live with that. Like, hey, I was at least given the opportunity.
Right.
I know I stunk. I mean, there's not always going to be that self-awareness. Like there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to be confident in their abilities and maybe just think that they're getting a raw deal. But I think especially in the transfer portal era, it just makes so much sense. Like why do we have to have like regimented depth charts in the spring when all we're doing here is trying to get better and get everyone on the same page? And if knowing that there's guys that can leave here in May, I think it can go work both ways. Like maybe it's a good way for Notre Dame to show these guys the door. Like, hey, we gave you your shot and you fell short. Like, you sure you want to still stick around?
Right.
Or the guy's like, you know what? I had my chance. I have confidence that they're going to continue to give me opportunities. I'm not necessarily where I want to be right now, but I'm going to stick around here and not jump to the portal because I have faith in this coaching staff and they're being fair to me. So I think that's an interesting sort of wrinkle to how Notre Dame's defensive coaching staff is handling this. I have no idea if the transfer portal part of that it plays any role in that, but that's at least so as someone who covers recruiting and we cover the portal so much, that really stuck out to me as something that maybe could be an added benefit to that sort of philosophy.
The one other thing that I thought it was interesting, and we're not going to would have kind of held on to this for a while, but we're not going to talk to the defensive lineman for another couple weeks, and that's Jordan Botelho. Al Golden's take on Jordan Botelho, and it's kind of like what we've been saying. He expects him to be knocking on the door, and he's, I did a story on Holden Stays, and Holden was talking about what a handful he is. He's the hardest guy to block on the defense. And what Al Golden was talking about is, he always brings the energy. He always brings the fight. Now, what he has to do is play within the framework of the defense, be assignment correct, and have poise, because sometimes Jordan gets mad, and he's gotten 15-yard penalties before. And so he's on that doorstep of either really taking off and becoming a star, or it's just never going to happen. And it's kind of one of the exciting points in an athlete's career. I mean, generally they do take that higher road where they when they finally get their chance and they're mature enough. So I can't wait to see what happens with him, because I've been this Jordan Botelho obsession since he's been on campus. I just think he's a fascinating guy. Well, I had somebody in Hawaii that I really respect, and he was surprised he ended up picking at Notre Dame because he thought he was too much of a badass. And but I think if you can have that control with that attitude, then you've got something really, really special, because he will knock you into next week.
Yeah, it was funny. Like,
am I allowed to say badass on YouTube?
Well, I mean, you just said it twice now, so okay, I guess we're right. Okay. No, I think we're fine. I will mark it accordingly, that just in case people are offended by that. But it was fun, like hearing Al Golden say that's like, this is like the exact conversation that Eric and I have had so many times over and over again. I was like, listen, I understand the promise of Jordan Botelho, but it sounds like he's not like doing the things he's supposed to do, and he has problems with that. And so like Notre Dame knows that. Al Golden's aware of that. I'm sure he heard things about Jordan Botelho when he joined the staff, and now he's had opportunities to work with him, and he sees that potential in him. But if you're messing up, those are the things that drive coaches crazy, and those are the things that the coaches feel are the most correctable. And if you're not correcting them, then that's going to drive them nuts. So I hope that Jordan Botelho can reach that potential and get to that, and I think he can. But I think it's just more. You would like to think by at this point it wouldn't even be part of the conversation anymore, but it still is. And so that is something that, and maybe that's just because Notre Dame's like, hey, we need to make sure that he doesn't revert into some of his old ways and make sure that he's staying on top of things, because the opportunity and the potential is there for him. Yeah,
I didn't get the idea that he has been messing up to this point. I do think some of this is post-traumatic, that they've seen him in practice lose the edge on a run play and it go for a touchdown, and then the next play make a 16-yard sack. And what you could do, and what they learned to do with Jordan at the end of last year, was put him really in position where he could only succeed. They didn't put him in on a lot of running downs where him not setting the edge was going to cost them. And then he got a little bit more comfortable with being consistent with that. So I think there's enough there. Otherwise, I think they would have gone out and gotten somebody else in the portal besides just Javonte. I think they would have gotten a true Viper in the portal, and they still could do that. But I think they wanted to see what Botelho could do, what Junior Tuihalamaka could do, and Josh Burnham and those guys, because you're talking about three Rivals top 250 players right there. I mean, if they're not being developed, then what's the deal? And I understand that Junior and Joshua were high school linebackers. In fact, wasn't Joshua also a quarterback?
Yeah.
So, and to be fair to Jordan, he was a inside linebacker. I mean, he was ranked as an inside linebacker in Hawaii by Rivals. So, that position is very, very important. You just lost your all-time sack leader, just walked out the door to the NFL draft. So it's very important. And then they didn't get Keon Keeley either at the end of the recruiting cycle. And if they want to attract elite defensive ends, they need to show they can develop them. Now, certainly they did with Foskey, but a lot of that was Mike Elston's tutelage. He had 1 year under Al Washington, so we'll see how that goes.
A question about Botello, so I'll throw it in here from Lee Marie. Since Foskey says Botello will pop next year, have you seen anything in practice beyond what Golden said today to comment on?
I want to see him in a competitive situation. I mean, him going through drills, he's going to look like $1 million.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing him do drills. We have a full practice coming up on Saturday, Lee Marie. So let me give you the answer next week if you're on and ask me that again, because we will see competitive situations. And that's where the mistakes, if they're going to pop up, are going to show up. Otherwise, in drills, he looks like a first-round draft choice.
Yeah, the only like competitive things we've seen so far was on this past Saturday. There was some of the so we see the first 5 periods, and there was a couple segments where they do these open field tackling. There's not even actual tackling, but like tackling simulation between the wide receivers and tight ends and running backs, and then the defenders, whether it's linebackers, safeties, or cornerbacks. That's really the only like one-on-one or competitive stuff we've seen, and it's more like drill based than it is like beating the other guy based. So we haven't seen a lot in practice yet. I think we need to be transparent with that. We've seen them do some drills and doing things with their own positions, but we're not seeing a lot of competitive work. And I personally, I mean, with the offensive line, I feel a little bit more confident that I can see, okay, that guy's doing that right. Or when you see like Joe Rudolph's telling Billy Stroud to do that over again, it's like, well, clearly Billy's got some work to do then, because you wouldn't ask him to do it again if he was
unless
doing
he
it.
just loved it so much. You needed to see it a second time.
Right. So our what we've actually seen has been very limited, but I'm very hopeful that we'll get to see a lot of good things on Saturday to be able to give people more like concrete examples of stuff we've seen, and other than sort of scouring some of the competitive footage that Notre Dame releases in 40-second clips, but that's about the amount we've seen so far.
The other thing you can see more for offensive players is sometimes the burst,
Right.
A running back or wide receiver, well, okay. And Sam Hartman's arm.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can see that. Even like even that, because I was filming practice on the Saturday, and they had like the 4 quarterbacks lined up next to each other, all throwing at different angles. I was like, this is way too, I can't film this. This is too hard for me to do. I don't have enough talent to do this. Sam Hartman is a better quarterback than I am a filmer. So we'll try the quarterbacks next time. So hopefully we get some better or easier filming opportunities than that, because I was getting confused just trying to do it. I couldn't imagine someone watching it. So, but I think regardless of the footage we were able to provide, Sam Hartman has certainly looked pretty good. We have some more questions in here that I can throw into the mix.
Okay.
This one is from Stanley Watkins. Have you seen enough in practice to form any opinions on which players will be able to provide real help this year? If you have, who impresses you with the highest ceiling on offense and on defense?
Well, I'll tell you, I like the again, I want to see them in more competitive situations, but I like the freshman wide receivers. I mean, Rico Flores is the football crush on those 3, but Braylon James has had his moments. I think Jaden Greathouse is going to show out. I think coming in the door, he was the most advanced in terms of running crisp routes and understanding defenses and playing the best competition. I mean, they played incredible competition there in Texas with Jayden. I'm trying to think beyond him. I mean, I like Kenny Minchie, but I can't take my eyes off of Sam Hartman, so I'm not giving you an accurate assessment there. Those would be the ones on offense. On defense, I would say Christian Gray and Minnick are the 2 that I'm most curious about. And again, I want to see them in more competitive situations. But just the way they move, I like the way the linebackers move. But I think the guys that were freshmen last year have a better chance of moving up and challenging than the guys that are freshmen this year right now, just for various reasons.
Yeah. Of the freshman wide receivers, Flores is the person that has impressed me the most. I think Rico Flores looks just sort of really natural. I don't know that he's like going to blow you away with speed, or he's not the biggest guy, but he's very fluid, and he seems to be very sound in his technique, that allows himself to get open and maybe get by guys when you wouldn't think he would be able to, given maybe some of the things you would see on paper. If we're talking about a non-freshman on offense, Holden Stays was a guy that didn't do a ton last year, but he looks like $1 million every time I see him. It's like, man, that guy's going to be something pretty special. But we haven't necessarily seen a lot of actual evidence of that in terms of actual plays being made, but we just haven't seen many plays yet this spring.
He's also significantly bigger. I did a story on that just the other day. He's gone from 226 to 242. So he's
all those tight ends are big. They're not necessarily Michael Mayer big, but they got a lot of size to them. Even Eli Raridan was putting on some weight and getting bigger, preparing for next season. In terms of defensive guys, I don't know that anyone has jumped to mind yet. I mean, one guy that's jumped out a little bit to me was Jason Anye. I mean, we're talking about guys that will be able to, who can sort of step up in the interior in terms of the backups behind Howard Cross and Riley Mills. And I don't know that Jason Anye was at the top of anyone's list of guys that you would consider. We tend to always like revert to the younger guys and the guys that we haven't seen as much and sort of write off some of those older guys that are more slowly developed.
Or guys from Rhode Island.
Generally we just write off all guys from Rhode Island. No, he's a big dude. And Al Golden named him specifically. He was naming the backups, but I think Anya was the first name I think that came out of his mouth when he was naming those guys. So I think that usually isn't by happenstance. There's usually a reason for that when someone's name comes up like that. And Tyson's Ford name didn't come up like that. You had asked him about him specifically. Right. That was like, if you're trying to read maybe too much into it, it's like, well, maybe Tyson's got some more work to do there because he wasn't brought up without being asked about him.
My read was, and I thought Al's answer to it was really good, was he improved his body. I mean, he went from 275 to 292. He looks like a college defensive tackle. And now it's time to translate that into production, translate that into technique. And that's what this spring is about for him. This is his opportunity. Not that he won't get another opportunity, but I sound like, never mind. But I was going to say Eminem, that you got those one shot. I'm not going to start rapping here, but boy, that would be ugly. So, but there's a lot of guys in that circumstance, and that's when this happens. You get into the season and you don't have as many opportunities to improve because it's always about game plan and install and stuff. So the fundamentals don't get hit as hard as they do now. So he's really got a great opportunity ahead of him because now he has the body and he has the understanding. So it's just getting in there and being productive.
All right, we have some linebacker questions here I will throw at us. First one is from Smokin' Scott. I'm excited to hear on differences in linebacker play this year. With all the talent we have, they should be dominant. Would you agree that was our biggest issue last year?
Tyler and I aren't going to agree on this probably. I was more critical of their play. I don't know that it was the biggest problem last year, but I think run fits, and it wasn't always the linebackers. I think Maris Leofau was disappointing last year, given the expectations he had for himself. And I think the coaching staff, and even I thought he was going to be a much more consistent player, and he really wasn't that productive or explosive. And I think you had Jack Kaiser playing out of position. I thought J.D. Bertrand had a really good year, and everybody wanted to see Prince Colley and Jalen Sneed and some of these other guys. You're going to see them this year. I'm just not sure how all this is going to shake out, but I think there's a lot more talent. And even somebody like Nolan Ziegler, Nolan, I mean, comes in, he's a high school safety wide receiver, and he seemed like a natural rover. Well, he's backing up J.D. Bertrand, a middle linebacker, I found out today. And I know that Al Golden has been pretty pleased with him so far. If he's physical enough, which he definitely has the mentality to be physical, like his favorite thing is being on the kickoff coverage team and running down and hitting somebody. So he's got the mentality. It's how he holds up in terms of having guards flying at him and so forth. But you will have one of the best coverage middle linebackers you can get, at least as a backup, with his skill set. So even somebody like that we don't talk about a lot, I think has a chance to contribute to this team. So I do think the linebackers will be improved. And then you have the freshman class. There's a lot of good raw material with Preston Zinter, Drake Bowen, who's also playing baseball, and Jaden Osbury.
Yeah, in terms of it being the biggest issue last year, I'm assuming he means just on the defensive side, because I would say there were bigger issues with the passing game if you're talking about the whole team.
I'll speak for spoken, Scott, and say yes.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't think the safeties played particularly well last season. I thought Tariq Bracy and Benjamin Morrison played well at corner. I thought like the other guy that was in there, whether it was Cam Hart or Jayden Mickey, I think there were some weaknesses there that were sort of all combined to be bad parts of the defense at various times. The linebacker thing, I would have liked there to be more playmaking from that position. And that was one of the reasons I was like, well, Jack Kaiser's making plays when he's out there. Why isn't he playing more? Maris Leofau seems to not be making plays, but he's playing more than anyone. Although he did have a crucial interception in the Syracuse game. So I'm interested to see what the rotation looks like. And that's a question Greg Given asked, are we going to get a better rotational use at linebacker and defensive line this year? I think so. I mean, I think given that Al Golden knows these guys better, I think he probably has more comfort, and the guys are more prepared to do that. Prince Cali understands what he's doing better now. He was talking about sort of just not being able to understand the checks and everything that he needed to do at times last season, and now that's not an issue for him. Jalen Sneed, I would imagine, is in a similar boat with being able to. I mean, he was just a true freshman last year. I think it's really hard to get out there as a true freshman at linebacker, especially when there's so many experienced guys out there.
Especially when he never really played a traditional linebacker. He was an all over the place kind of guy in high school, including quarterback.
So I do think we'll see more rotation there. I would be surprised if Maris Leofau played as many snaps as he did last year. And that's not like specific to Maris Leofau. I just think that they will try to rotate more because they do have the options there that they're growing confidence in. Defensive line wise, I think I've never really had an issue with the defensive line rotation. I think sometimes they may rotate too liberally, and like it's like, whoa, this is a big play. Why do we have a third string defensive tackle out there right now? And so
in the first half of the last season, especially with Foskey, there were times where you said, why isn't Foskey out there?
Right. And now this year there isn't a Foskey out there, so I would imagine that they will continue to.
Why isn't he out there?
Yeah, I know why he's not out there, because he's on an NFL roster. So I do think there will continue to be rotation on the defensive line as well. What are your thoughts, Eric? You agree?
I agree. I think the safety position will have some rotation as well. I think probably 4 guys playing safety. I don't know if Ben Minnick is ready to jump in there. And then corner is going to be interesting to see, because you figure Morrison's going to play and Harper's probably going to play the nickel, the grad transfer from Oklahoma State. And so how do the other guys fit in, the other pieces? And I think it's up to them how healthy they are and how they come along, whether Jayden Mickey, can be the spring Jayden Mickey, can be the fall Jayden Mickey, and Christian Gray, and then how healthy Cam Hart is, especially.
All right. We got some more questions. We can just keep rattling through these. This one is from BRBK or BRBRKRKR1. Why doesn't Under Armour use several ND footballers in their ads each year? And there's a comment after that. Under Armour is in serious danger of losing the apparel account and need to hugely step up their NIL game with ND or good riddance.
Okay, that sounds like more of a Tyler question.
All apparel questions go to me.
All apparel questions go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I don't know that there's been a big push for Notre Dame guys to be selling ads. I think at one time I remember like last year there was like a Dick's Sporting Goods ad with Under Armour gear that I want to say included Braden Lindsay and maybe Avery Davis.
Lindsay did a shoe. I don't think it was Under Armour though, but I'm not sure.
So, I mean, it hasn't been a huge part of the deal here.
It's not memorable, anyways.
Right? But I mean, like it's under like so. How do you want Under Armour to do this? You wanted to do that for every school that they have contracts with. Because if you go to Nike, it's not like Nike's going to start prioritizing Notre Dame all of a sudden. Because I think if you talk about NIL deals that people associate with Nike, it's all Oregon stuff, and people get mad about that. So I don't know. I don't know that would be your reason for leaving Under Armour, because I don't know that you would go somewhere else that would prioritize that, right?
Okay. Well, I was thinking about a different angle to his question. I mean, if it's like an ad in the game program, why wouldn't you use Notre Dame athletes and help with the NIL thing? I mean, that would be a drop in the bucket, but I mean, but I could see why nationally you might be hesitant to do that. And I think there's a lot more that's going to go into it than using athletes and ads when they decide the next apparel / equipment contract. And our Under Armour didn't come through on some of its sports science promises either. That's one of the things Jack Swarbrick was really bragging about and excited about, his tail wagging about, was all these sports science things that they were going to be ahead of the curve on, and they really weren't. And so I think all those things need to be considered when you look for the next company and maybe negotiate and say, hey, we'd like some NIL opportunities for our athletes. But I don't think that should be the pivotal part of why you sign the contract.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I don't know that Under Armour has like followed the trajectory that maybe Notre Dame would have thought that they would have as an entire brand or company. So I would imagine that may have more to do with what Notre Dame decides to do than specific NIL deals, because it seems like, what evidence do we have that NIL deals is driving anything around Notre Dame football right now? Like that's not the top priority. It doesn't seem. So not that there aren't NIL opportunities, but it's not what's driving the bus for whether it's recruits or transfers or guys that are on the team. It's a part of the deal now, but it's not like the driving force behind a lot of things that happen at Notre Dame. All right, we got one more question I want to hit in here before we jump back to our outline. Jerry McClurg asked, in 2024, Notre Dame will have a quarterback, Buckner, Minchie at quarterback, Buckner, Minchie, and Jelly and Carr. Who do you think will prevail out of that group?
To be the quarterback in 2024?
Yes.
I would, based on how Buckner has thrown the ball and what the coaches' comments have been, and Sam Hartman, him embracing the Sam Hartman experience, at least at this point, I would go with Buckner. I think Sam Hartman coming here is going to be the best thing that's happened to him while he's been at Notre Dame. And I think he's going to benefit from that. But I like Minchie a lot. And Jelly, he's not doing anything wrong. And Carr is the next phenom. And maybe he overtakes Buckner at some point in 24. But right now, Buckner's an ascending player, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I would, as long as Tyler Buckner stays with the program, I would be picking Tyler Buckner, and I think he would be the significant favorite in that competition. I'll be honest, I've spent like zero energy or time watching Tyler Buckner in practice because there's so many different people that I want to see, and it's like, what? I know who Tyler Buckner is. Now, obviously, he can continue to improve, but I know he's not the starting quarterback, and it doesn't necessarily matter to me at this moment what Tyler Buchner looks like. Now, I'll try to, especially on Saturday when we get to see a full practice and we have more time to devote to looking at different people.
We also have interviews with the quarterbacks on Friday, so we'll be talking to all these guys.
Yeah, and we'll get Gino Gadouli's thoughts on that as well in terms of how he's progressing as a quarterback, and the other guys as well, of course. So I think that, I mean, barring a surprise, I mean, I really like Kenny Minchie as a prospect, and I think he looks pretty good out there. Steve Angeli, I haven't been as high on, and I think there's just too much there, in my opinion, for CJ Carter to like walk in the door to become the starter with those guys ahead of him. But crazier things have happened. But I would put Tyler Buchner as the favorite in that competition in the future.
Amen.
All right. Those are all our questions, Eric.
Okay. Do we want to switch to offense or finish up on defense here?
I think let's talk about the red zone. We didn't talk about that. I think that's probably an important topic that people would like to hear about. What did Al Golden say about the red zone improvements that he's focusing on?
Right. So they need to challenge the offenses more. I think his take was that they were a little bit too reactive, and again, it's just a horizontal game. There's not vertical passing in the red zone. You run out of real estate there, so you have to defend different. I feel like that he took a lot of responsibility that his play calls weren't the best, but the whole group needs to be more aggressive. They need to get turnovers there. They didn't get turnovers anywhere really on the field. You think about being the number 22 defense in the country in total defense. That's amazing when you get as few turnovers as they forced. They were 100th in the country in turnovers gained. They got better at it at the end of the season, but what stops you in the red zone if you're an offense? I mean, it's a missed field goal or usually a turnover. Sometimes it's a turnover on downs, but it's usually, you throw a pick or you fumble, and Notre Dame needs to get more of those. So he sounded, that there were some bad plays, some bad habits and things they did last year, and he, again, took responsibility for it and feels like he has the fix.
Yeah, what it reminded me today. It reminded me of, like, I remember last year we're like, oh man, they're starting every practice with red zone. What a brilliant idea! That's such an important area of the field. And then obviously it didn't necessarily pan out for improvements. It actually, Notre Dame was a lot worse than it's been in red zone defense. And I think even when we asked about it, it was because I think it was like credited, like, yeah, that's what Al Golden had done in the NFL, and we liked the idea, but they were doing it more to like save guys' legs. Like, we don't want to get guys running deep right away in practice. We'd rather start in the red zone. And I think to me, it's just like sort of an example of what we as writers who have little insights to practice and try to find storylines at every opportunity. We sort of like glom on to like, oh, red zone, this is going to be great. They're doing this. Like, what a brilliant idea. It's like, well, it's more about like physical fitness than it is about like scheming up things in the red zone that are going to help them 6 months from now. So I think that I was just reminded of that when the red zone talk came up, because I know we sort of at least I thought, I was like, oh, that does sound like a really good idea. That makes a lot of sense. And then it didn't necessarily pan out to be something that made a big difference.
Now, and we should point out too, in terms of teams not even getting to the red zone,
right?
Notre Dame was one of the top 10 in the country. So that saved that stat from being really damaging to them. But they do need, Al did acknowledge they need to get better there.
All right, let's talk about the offense.
Okay, well, you had a chance to talk to Jared Parker on Saturday. We also got a chance to talk to the players, and it's interesting their perspective on what they think the offense is going to look like. It's not that they're contradictory, just some people more than others will offer more details. but overall, Tyler, let's start with Jared Parker. And talking to him, what was the sense you got in terms of how much they're keeping and how much they're willing to play around with it a little bit?
I think they're keeping a lot, at least in the way he describes it, and I mean, maybe it's different terminology here or there that changes or slight tweaks here or there, but sort of
Is
the
one of the new terms long pass? I'm just kidding.
some of the terminology will change, and like Jared Parker had made reference, like there's some terminology that we'll identify, and they're like, we don't even remember why we called it that because the people that were that decided to call it that are no longer here. So let's just change it to something that makes sense and we can have a reasoning behind it for ourselves. But yeah, I mean, he's like, hey, I get more confident in our offense when I'm standing by our offensive linemen. We have mature running backs. We're going to lean on those guys. We have quarterbacks that we're confident in. So I don't expect there to be huge differences in the defense, but he did say, like, before he wrapped up what he was talking about, he's like, yeah, we're going to continue to build on the perimeter and see if we can put ourselves in space to make some plays. And that was something that Prince Colley, when he was asked about the offense today, what differences he's noticed, he's like, not a ton, but he said he did feel like they were challenging them on the perimeter a little bit more than they had in the past. And so that's just a little bit of a glimpse there. And I think that I don't think it's not going to be an offense that there's wholesale changes. Like Jared Parker even said, like, we got to get Sam Hartman to learn how to take snaps under center or be more comfortable with that because that's not something he does. And that was a part of the offense last year, and it will be a part of the offense this year. It's not going to be like they're going to do it every first down or something like that, but they want that to be part of the offense. And so they're going to make Sam Hartman learn how to do that, even if he hasn't done it in a very, very long time.
Right. So in talking to some of the players, I think they feel similar that they're going to lean on the offensive line, but they also, I mean, Holden Stays especially thought they were going to be more vertical with their passing game, whether it was the tight ends or the wide receivers. He said our wide receiver room has really improved, and he felt like they had some, and that Jared Parker's past would make him more open to chucking it down the field. And you got a quarterback that can. So, I mean, you got multiple quarterbacks probably that can. So, I think, again, balance is going to be the key. I mean, the best offenses are the ones that you always put the defensive coordinator in a run pass dilemma as much as you can. And when you can't cheat your defense one way or another, it usually isn't as effective. And so they want to be able to do both and keep you guessing. But the fact that they can do that, I mean, Tommy Reese didn't have a lot of receivers and didn't have a lot of receivers that could get open deep, and Drew Pine couldn't really throw the ball deep accurately.
And like, if there's a deep route and Sam Hartman thinks he has a chance, he's probably going to take that chance, whereas Drew Pine's probably not going to do that.
Right.
That's good. So that's going to make the offense look different, even if it could be the exact same play call. It just was never actually thrown to the deep option, and now maybe it'll be thrown there more often.
Speaking of Drew Pine, they're about a week ahead of Notre Dame in their sequencing for spring football, and right now he is the number 2 quarterback on their depth chart.
All right, I was curious about that, but I hadn't actually looked into it. So that is an intriguing update. Who's number 1?
It was a guy that was there last year. His last name begins with T, so that I didn't have that detail. It's not the freshman with the NIL story.
Yeah. Well, okay. Then to me, that seems less troublesome for Drew Pine if they're still sticking with the guy that was there last year. If it was the freshman, then it's like, well, you're in trouble. But yeah, that's I'm sure Notre Dame fans will be interested to see how things pan out for Drew Pine at Arizona State.
And I think a lot of people too with the offense thought, okay, the sports writers like to call it the 12 formation. I guess a lot of people like to call it, but basically 1 running back, 2 tight ends.
Sports writers got it from the football coaches. The sports writers didn't make it up. The coaches call it that.
Right. But then we don't sometimes describe what it actually is.
Right.
We just throw it out there and expect everybody to know. And my mom doesn't know my mom didn't even know what a tight end was when she kind of became enamored with Michael Mayer in the Las Vegas game. And she goes, what position does he play? And I said, tight end. And she goes, no, what position? I go, Mom, that's the name of the position. And this is what the tight end does. But so telling her 12 was not going to help.
No.
But she does like Michael Mayer. And good for her. She picked up the best player on the team.
Good job.
But I think, just because there are only 3 healthy tight ends in the spring, there's going to be 6 if everything goes well in the fall. You're going to get Eli Reardon back, who's now 6'7", about 250, and you're going to get Kevin Bauman back, who's about 3 weeks ahead in his rehab from where Eli is, and a pretty reliable guy that's missed some time. He had a broken fibula the year before and missed a couple of months. And they've been kind of workout partners. And then you have Flanagan, the freshman from the West Coast, coming in. So you're going to have 6. There's a lot of talent there. Just because they didn't catch a lot of passes doesn't mean there's not a lot of talent there. And the thing that's really interesting about Stays is at 242, now he's becoming a willing and able blocker instead of a guy that you think of as a detached tight end at 226.
Right.
That could be confused with Jayden Thomas, who's a big wide receiver. But I think you're going to see some pretty good tight end play. You're just not going to see that right at this point, that dominant tight end. Mitchell Evans would be the number 1 guy right now, but there's any number of them that could be number 1 or at least the sidekick in the 12 formation.
I didn't read through Mitchell Evans's interview because I wasn't there for it.
I read through all of them.
Did he get asked about his elbow?
No, he didn't.
He was wearing a giant brace in his elbow at practice, and so he was still practicing, but obviously he's protecting it from something. So that's
the
something.
Media. So you can elbow them off and say it's time for the interview to end.
That's probably something we should get some clarity on of what
Right.
he's dealing with there, and if I don't know if he has had surgery or needs surgery, but it's a massive brace. I think we have a picture that shows it, and it's like, wow, that's some serious hardware there on his arm, but he's still practicing, and they need him because they don't have a lot of healthy tight ends right now in practice.
Right.
So to keep him out there, and obviously if he was like in actual danger, they probably wouldn't have him to continue to practice, but something to keep our eye on moving forward. Want to talk a little bit about recruiting before we get out of here?
Yeah, we need to jump on recruiting. So today there was a verbal commitment this afternoon from an offensive lineman. Tell us about Anthony Knapp.
Yeah, Anthony Knapp is a 6'4", 270-pound offensive lineman from Roswell, Georgia. He was just assigned a 3-star rating by Rivals today. He was previously unrated, but once you commit to a big-time school like Notre Dame, our recruiting analysts make sure that they double back and review everything on them and make sure they have an assigned grade for them. I've been learning more about Anthony Knapp in the last, even hours here before he committed, because he visited Notre Dame last week and then got an offer then, and so he committed shortly after that. Anthony Knapp, his first Power 5 offer was from Virginia Tech when Joe Rudolph was the offensive line coach there. And so Joe Rudolph obviously felt strongly about him, decided to invite him to campus and offer him, and ends up committing to Notre Dame pretty quickly. I personally have some questions about Anthony Knapp's potential and what he is as a player. I think he's certainly, I would consider a project as a 270-pounder who's probably going to play inside. I don't know that he's going to be an offensive tackle at the college level. So he needs to get bigger for sure. And my question, like, I watched his highlight film. He gets after it. Like he goes out of his way, even when it doesn't matter, to try and put guys on the ground. But almost to a point where it's not necessarily a great thing, in my opinion. Like, he's blocking guys, going after them, pushing them out of bounds when they're 20 yards away from the play, and it's not impacting the play at all. It's like, well, that guy's probably just giving up. You're probably not he's not like actually fighting you to like make a play at this point. So he's probably like, just end this. Let's get this over with. So, and then now these are the highlights he chose. Now, maybe there are better highlights of him that show a more well-rounded blocker, and maybe he's a better offensive lineman than he is in a highlight chooser. And now I could just, maybe I'm just, this is just my opinion. I think other people disagree. Obviously, Joe Rudolph made him a priority when I don't know that Notre Dame's was in like a desperate need to get an offensive line commitment right away, especially for an interior guy when they have
and
some
they
interior,
already have Peter Jones.
when they have some interior guys, and tackle seems to be more of a pressing need in this class. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how he continues to develop. Continue to watch him. I mean, that toughness is great. Like that, you want that in your player, and you want a guy that wants to block to the whistle, block till he's told not to do that anymore. But there's got to be more to his game than that, and I didn't necessarily see as much on film as I wanted to. And so hopefully we get to learn more about that and maybe see more of that as things sort of progress moving forward.
Okay, so there are some people that have been visiting campus that Notre Dame would love to see commit and have better highlight film and maybe even better phone etiquette. So who are the names that people need to know about? Who was here last weekend? Who is going to be here this week? And so forth. Anybody that A, is significant, and B, maybe on getting close to commit watch.
Well, I don't know how you would be on this YouTube page if you didn't know that Justin Scott was on campus last week. The 5-star defensive tackle out of Chicago has been a long-time priority for Notre Dame in the 2024 class, and he made his long-awaited return to campus. Things seem to go well there. I still think Georgia,
on a really bad weather day, but fortunately he knows what the weather's like.
Right. Yeah. Given that he's from Chicago, weather is not necessarily a surprise to him. And so I think Notre Dame made some progress there. I think Georgia is still going to be a tough contender there, and he plans to make an official visit down to Georgia. So that will be
Ohio State.
And Ohio State, and then he also plans to make a visit to Miami, I believe. And so he has some visits lined up. Be interested to see if Notre Dame can get him back on campus later this spring. And then I would imagine as his recruitment continues, that he could get back on campus in the summer for an official visit, perhaps. Or maybe he decides he doesn't want to use an official visit to Notre Dame because it's the price to go other places is more prohibitive. So it would make more sense to use official visits for the farther away ones. Some other 2024 prospects that are important for Notre Dame that were on campus that I think Notre Dame's in a good spot with are John Mitchell, a cornerback out of Jacksonville, Florida, Jayden Riddell, a tight end out of Missouri, and Andrew Sprague, an offensive lineman, I believe out of Kansas. It might be Missouri. I think he might be Kansas City, and I'm not sure which side of the border he's on there. So those are the guys that are, at least in the 2024 class. There's a lot of 2025 guys that are both on campus last weekend and will be on campus next weekend. And I've written a lot of stories about them. So head to InsideNDSports.com if you haven't seen that coverage already. In terms of 2024 guys that are coming this week, Jared and Jacob Smith are a pair of defensive line twins that Notre Dame has been in a good position with. I think they would be towards the top of the list as most likely defensive linemen to end up in Notre Dame's class. And so we'll see how that continues to progress with those guys getting back on campus for another visit. They were both on campus back in January as well. Some offensive linemen to monitor, Caleb Brewer and Kevin Haywood. I'm sort of interested in seeing how like the offensive line target list sort of shapes up, given that a lot of these guys were offered by Harry Hiestand. And so Joe Rudolph will have a say in sort of the pecking order that some of these guys fall into. So especially when they get on campus, that can give them a better opportunity to become more familiar with them. And certainly there's probably a number of these guys that he has some familiarity with from his time at Virginia Tech, like he did with Anthony Knapp. And then a couple of cornerbacks worth knowing that will be on campus this weekend. Caleb Beasley, who has visited Notre Dame a number of times, but did commit to Tennessee and still remains verbally committed to Tennessee. But Notre Dame is continuing to push there. He's continuing to show interest in Notre Dame. So that will be a fun recruitment to continue to monitor. And then Aaron Scott out of Ohio, who many think will probably end up in Ohio State's class as a kid from Ohio that Ohio State wants, but has shown a lot of interest in Notre Dame as well. And so we'll see if Notre Dame can keep sort of chipping away in that recruitment. Notre Dame is in a really good spot with cornerbacks. It already has 2 cornerbacks committed, and Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. Would like to get maybe just one more. So I don't know. It might be a first come, first serve situation, but we'll see how that sort of plays out for Notre Dame as it continues to root quarterbacks. 120-25 guys I wanted to mention because he was on campus last weekend and he will be back on campus this weekend is 2025 tight end Ryan G. I actually wrote about him today, so if you want to learn more about him, you can do that. So pretty interesting that he visited with his mother last weekend, and then he was like, yeah, hopefully I can get back on campus with my father in the summer. And then he reached out to me last night and said, hey, I'm actually going to be back at Notre Dame on Saturday with my dad. So he's quite the traveler. I think he's visited 19 different schools so far. And I asked if he's going to make some game visits in the fall. He's like, yeah, I think every weekend probably. So
wow,
they are ready and willing to travel.
Where's he from again?
He is from the Atlanta, Georgia area. I believe it's Milton High School.
Okay, well, we have direct flights from Atlanta to South Bend.
Yeah, that is definitely helpful. Definitely helpful. And Delta being a hub for Delta, they can we probably get to a lot of places from Atlanta. So that is probably maybe plays a role in that as well.
Well, we need to mention our 5-star recruit who is going to join us Monday, and that's Charleston Bowles. We did a nationwide search. We had an opening for a recruiting writer, and Charleston was just impressive from the beginning and still impressing us. He is from Indianapolis. He played basketball for Bishop Chatard. His football knowledge is very good. His writing is outstanding. I think where he's going to be a real asset for us is just the relationships he'll be able to build with coaches and players. He's got a great personality, really authentic guy. I think you'll really like him. We'll have to have him on the YouTube show so you can get to meet him, and then he'll probably have his own show because he'll be way more popular than us and way easier on the eye to look at. But we are really excited about him. He starts Monday, and so we hope you'll welcome him.
Yeah, and I just dropped a comment with his Twitter handle. It's at CBowles, BOWLES01. Today, he officially announced it on Twitter. We actually shared the news with our subscribers last week. I wanted to give them a heads up on the Insider Lounge. And so we're really excited for him. He's going to move to the South Bend area soon. That's important for us to have him here to be able to help us with a number of different things and be involved with as many different things as possible. And so we're excited to bring him on board and continue to bring as much recruiting coverage as we can to our subscribers, our readers, our listeners, our viewers as possible. And I think Charleston's going to do a lot of good work for us.
Amen. Did you want to do any more recruiting? Go on to Pro Day, hit some questions. I'm up for it all.
I don't know that I sort of set things where the Notre Dame stands in the 2024 class now, given the addition of Anthony Knapp. Notre Dame is number 3 in the country in the 2024 class according to the Rivals team rankings, with now 9 commitments, 2 offensive line commits now with Anthony Knapp joining Peter Jones. I'm a little concerned with where Notre Dame stands with some of the guys sort of at the top of their board and
of offensive linemen, or top of the board period.
Top of the board period. I think more broadly, like for instance, Mike Matthews is a safety Notre Dame liked a lot. I think he released a top something, and it was a fairly sizable list, and Notre Dame didn't make the cut. And so there are guys that Notre Dame has been going after that are more highly ranked, that I don't know that Notre Dame has had a ton of progress with. And we've seen Notre Dame continue to offer guys. And so we'll see, like, take safety for instance, like Davis Andrews and Kennedy Urlacher are 2 of the safeties that Notre Dame likes a lot. And we'll host them on visits this spring. But they're still they're 3-star recruits according to Rivals. So is Notre Dame reaching there, or do we at Rivals have too low of a rating on them? I think we'll see how that continues to evolve. Obviously, the ratings aren't finalized yet. There's plenty of
see these
guys.
sometimes early in the cycle, guys haven't had exposure because Kyle Hamilton was a 3-star when
Right.
he committed.
So yeah, so I'm interested to sort of see like who's more wrong there. Is it us so far, or is it Notre Dame getting a little maybe too desperate at some positions there? I don't know that I would describe them as desperate right now, but I'm curious to see how some of those things shake out if Notre Dame doesn't get some of its top guys. Like I mentioned earlier, offensive tackle is a position that Notre Dame needs to address because I believe both of their linemen are guards in the future, or maybe a center even. Notre Dame has a lot of options on the defensive line, but no one wants to like sort of jump in the boat after Owen Wafel did a while back. I think that was last May, maybe. And so Notre Dame is in good positions with, like I mentioned, the Smith twins, Bryce Young, the son of Bryant Young, Justin Scott, obviously, Logan Thomas, who was on campus last weekend, who I probably should have mentioned when I was talking about the 2024 guys. He was actually on campus last week. I think he was on campus for like 4 days. It was like longer than an official visit. So that was good news for Notre Dame. So lots of sort of moving pieces there with Notre Dame in the 2024 class. I have a lot of options there. I'm fascinated to see how things sort of separate. Like who are the guys that Notre Dame likes the most, that has the most interest, and does someone elevate after Notre Dame gets to know the guys more and stuff like that. I think some of these guys, they just want to get on campus to get even more opportunities to see the want to continue to push for them or not.
Okay, very good.
All right, I think that'll wrap it up for this edition of Football Never Sleeps.
So we can go to sleep.
That's not happening. I got some more work to do, and we'll get you guys some more coverage on InsideNDSports.com and the Inside Lounge message board. We'll be back next week with a night that's to be determined. So make sure you're subscribed to be notified of the upcoming show. Share this video with friends that may be interested in it. We like the growth that we are seeing on our YouTube page, and it has a lot to do with our viewers helping us out and liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with others. So we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time.